What's up, Sinisa, Super Bad Estrada here, and I just want to give a huge special shout out to the Relay. Thank you so much for all of the continuous support, and thank you for all of the support during and after and before every single fight.
Welcome to the motherfucking Relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, there's a very popular narrative floating around in the YouTube boxing community.
Oh.
A narrative that entails a misquote. What's supposed to be a misquote.
From who?
That Deontay Wilder didn't actually say the things that he said in reference to his legs and how they were so affected by his costume.
Really?
In the second Tyson Fury fight. There are those out there that would have you believe that channels like mine, several others, are misquoting Deontay Wilder, slandering him, saying that he said things that he didn't say when...
Oh, really?
The story itself came from a very credible news source, a credible news source that these
ESPN
channels, the ones that are fans of Deontay Wilder, the ones that support him, a news source that these channels have cited themselves in previous instances, like when it was reported that Deontay Wilder was given a guarantee, a cash incentive of $20 million.
Remember that?
These same channels used this same news source as a reference for the story, as to make the story seem credible.
The 20 mil.
But when it comes to Wilder's costume and how he was quoted as saying it weakened his legs, all of a sudden, Dan Rafael and ESPN, they're no good. He didn't actually say these things because there's no video available of him saying these things. Yet, there's no video available of Wilder saying that there was something wrong with Tyson Fury's gloves. Yet, these same people immediately ran with that narrative. There's no video of Deontay Wilder saying
there was anything suspicious.
Remotely suspicious about Tyson Fury's hand wraps, his gloves, or how they felt against his body and against his face as he was pummeled into submission. There are no direct quotes and no video evidence of Wilder saying there was anything wrong with Tyson Fury's gloves. Yet these same individuals who are so skeptical
When it comes to his costume,
they readily believed that story. In the absence of video evidence, in the absence of Wilder being on camera saying that there was something wrong with Tyson Fury's gloves, no such video evidence exists.
None.
And no such quotations exist. Wilder, to date, has said absolutely nothing about Tyson Fury's gloves. Yet these guys readily believed this narrative that was spawned by a YouTuber.
A casual.
A YouTuber who is not a member of the media.
Nope.
And doesn't even normally cover boxing. But they readily believe that.
Even though Wilder didn't say it.
Here we have from a trusted news source, a major one, on the biggest sports network in the country.
ESPN.
Of course, that's where this story came from. We have quotation marks. Since this news broke, since this story was released, but Wilder's comments in reference to his costume and how they affected his legs, Wilder's made public statements.
He has.
He's addressed the media since then, and at no point in the juncture did he accuse them of misquoting him.
Not once.
Wilder didn't shoot this down. You don't see Wilder saying, hey, I never said that stuff about the costume. I never said that stuff. And Wilder's actually made public statements since then.
He's a zombie.
So, if this is in fact a misquote, why isn't Wilder saying anything about it?
Why hasn't he?
He's a grown man. He's 6'7". He was once heavyweight champion of the world, wasn't he?
Yeah.
You think he needs you sissies defending him on YouTube, defending him in the comments? If this stuff is all fake, and this is all a misquote, Wilder never actually said these things. If that's the case, then why doesn't Deontay Wilder himself dispel it?
Any ideas?
Why doesn't he debunk it?
Any ideas?
What exactly is he waiting for? Because he's made public statements since then, and none of them refute what this story is reporting. There are those out there who want me and you to believe that somehow Deontay Wilder is the victim of slander, that
Being slandered.
YouTube channels and popular media are slandering his name by putting words in his mouth that he himself never said, but these are his own words, reportedly. That's why they're in quotation marks.
Okay.
If Wilder had any issue with what was being printed, what was being reported, I think he himself would have dispelled it by now, as this costume,
Excuse.
whatever you want to call it, traveled far and wide. Everybody was talking about this thing. It went beyond the popular boxing periodicals, the popular boxing media. It went as far as being talked about in the New York Times. So when you got this many people talking about you, stories making these kinds of headlines. If it's not true,
Big if.
common sense would dictate that Deontay Wilder himself would release a public statement dispelling the misquote.
Right.
But he never did that. From the moment this story was published till now, Deontay Wilder has never refuted that those were his own words. So why are there those out there that want you to believe otherwise? Why are there those out there that are convinced that someone's slandering Wilder when these are reportedly his own words?
Of course they want you to feel sorry for him.
Of course they want you to view him as a victim of some kind of an injustice, when the only thing that happened to Deontay Wilder is he got what he asked for. He prioritized this Tyson Fury rematch ahead of everything else, including becoming an undisputed champion. He got what he wanted. It's just that it's more than he and his fans bargained for. So those fans
Are in a deep state of denial.
they couldn't believe their own eyes when they saw what Tyson Fury did to Deontay Wilder. Thus, they're not going to believe their own eyes when they read what Deontay Wilder had to say about it.
In print.
It's denial, folks. That's all it is. A very deep state of denial. And if there are those out there who wish to wallow in denial in reference to Wilder's comments post-fight, they can do so. They can stay there in their own denial. But I don't expect that any of these individuals will be turning to ESPN as a news source any further, since they don't
Trust their news.
believe it to be a credible news source anymore. As they were the ones who published this story. They are the ones who published these quotes from Deontay Wilder. If you're saying that he's being misquoted, I don't expect you guys least of all, I don't expect to see you guys using ESPN as a news source for anything.
Anymore.
But that the story is real, that the story was published, cannot be denied. This is no fabrication, no fiction, cooked up by YouTube authors. This news came by way of a major news outlet, and that is not up for debate. The story itself is easily searchable by anyone via their home computer or handheld phone.
You'll find it.
You can look this thing up just as easily as I did, and you'll find it. And if you want to question the legitimacy of this story, you must first establish your own. Who are you that I should listen to you instead of them? What are your credentials? Who are your sources? What evidence can you present to dispute and thereby refute what this story is saying? What have you got? What do you know that they don't?
Not a goddamn fucking thing.
Because ignorance in and of itself is not an adequate rebuttal to what we have here. And if it were true that Wilder were being misquoted, I think he would have said something about it by now.
Yeah.
Truth hurts. Moving on. ES News just uploaded this video earlier today. And the headline for the video states that Maurice Lee says he's starting camp for the Errol Spence fight. This isn't the first we've heard of this Maurice Lee character being associated with Errol Spence in what is to be Errol Spence's next fight. This is in spite of recent reports from Mike Kopinger stating that Spence is going to be fighting Danny Garcia. How does one reconcile what Mike Kopinger is saying with what Maurice Lee is saying? And the most that I can come up with is that perhaps Maurice knows something that we don't, that perhaps he is on standby as a contingency opponent for Errol Spence if things with Danny Garcia don't go to plan. The only problem I see with this potential scenario is that Danny Garcia is an orthodox fighter, whereas Maurice Lee is a southpaw. One would assume that if Errol Spence is going to be training to fight an orthodox fighter, you'll have another orthodox fighter as his stand-in. Maurice is not an orthodox fighter.
So what the hell is going on here?
You know that I'm not completely sure. But there has to be a reason that Maurice Lee is saying these things, as this really isn't the first that we've heard of this. Not if you've been paying attention. The last couple of weeks, Maurice Lee's name has been attached to the name of Errol Spence for what is to be Errol Spence's next fight. And that has to be reconciled. Why would this fighter be under the impression he's going to be fighting Spence next?
What gives?
And if this unheralded welterweight really is Errol Spence's next opponent, what are we to make of this? Well, I think what it would effectively communicate is that Errol Spence
That guy.
isn't all the way back. Maurice Lee in no way, shape, or form represents one of the best and brightest fighters in the welterweight division. I mean, he doesn't. No elite level wins, hasn't accomplished anything of note, not yet. But what he is a southpaw. That's interesting because you'd use a guy like this to tune up for a
Another guy.
better southpaw, a high-caliber, high-quality southpaw, a guy like a Terrence Crawford. Is it possible that Maurice Lee is intended to be a tune-up fight for Errol Spence in preparation for a Crawford fight? I mean, is that too far-fetched? Is that outside the realm of possibility? There's got to be a reason this guy keeps saying that he's going to fight Spence next. Could that be the reason? Is Spence preparing to fight Terrence Crawford?
Why does this guy keep saying he's fighting Spence?
And if he is fighting Errol Spence next, there has to be a reason they picked this guy. And it's not because of his notoriety. It's not because of his marquee value. What unique characteristics does this fighter possess that would land him an Errol Spence fight? And that's the most I can come up with. That this guy's a southpaw, and perhaps Spence is preparing to fight an even better southpaw. Better than this guy. We know that Errol Spence's next fight is going to be his first fight since the car accident, so he might actually need a lighter touch. He might actually need a gimme fight to get back in the swing of things. But a gimme fight against a southpaw, that's what makes it interesting. That's what makes it intriguing.
Southpaw, huh?
Along with the fact that these different reports really can't be reconciled. Mike's telling you that Errol's fighting Danny, but Maurice is telling you he's fighting Maurice. What the hell's going on? I don't know. Yet another southpaw that Errol could be tuning up for, if he is in fact going to be tuning up with this guy, is Manny Pacquiao. Maybe Errol Spence is still holding out hope that he'll land that fight. Not sure. Manny's a southpaw, right?
Right.
We don't know that Manny's engagement with the PBC is a done deal and he's free to roam and looking to do other things. We don't know what his situation is right now. But if Errol Spence ends up fighting this guy in what is his very next fight, there has to be a reason for it. And finally, I'm sure you guys have heard by now, per Bob Arum, that both Vasyl Lomachenko and Teofimo Lopez turned down interim bouts, and they're planning to have their fight in September. He was quoted as saying, "We wanted to stall for a time, but it's clear that each of them want to go right into that fight, so that's what we're going to be planning for September, with or without an audience." Obviously, we would love to do that fight with an audience, but again, how realistic is that? When are we going to be able to do fights with an audience? Once we get Loma here, which Igis Klimas, Lomachenko's manager, tells me we're going to try to bring him here in the beginning of June, then we're going to set a date for the fight. And if we can't do it with spectators, we're going to still do the fight. It may very well be that we have to do that fight without spectators, but we can't keep everybody waiting while we hope to open it up to spectators. The original plan was to give them each an interim fight. Loma was against that, and so was Lopez. We said, listen, we're going to postpone it because we don't know when we can get a live audience, and our plan was in June and July to give Loma a fight and give Lopez a fight, and they each turned that down. They said they're prepared to wait until September to fight each other. If you don't have your visa, you're out of luck now, because the consulates are shut down and there's a hold on granting visas. So you have to already have a visa, and then you have to be from a country where you can get into the United States. For example, we can't get an Englishman in, we can't get a European in, except if he comes from one of the Soviet bloc countries, because for some crazy reason, the travel ban doesn't affect those people. So if it's Lomachenko, we fly him into Moscow, and we fly him over here. And that's okay, because Loma has a green card. Seems like everybody's having a change of heart, doesn't it? As
Everybody.
both Bob Arum and Teofimo Lopez, they had serious aversions to having this fight without spectators present. No audience, no fight. That was the tune up until this news broke earlier today. This news dispels many popular narratives that have been circulating throughout the YouTube boxing cosmos. There were those out there who alleged that Vasyl Lomachenko wanted a tune-up fight, even though there was no evidence, no quotation marks, nothing indicating that Vasyl Lomachenko wanted an interim fight ahead of this Teofimo Lopez fight. And I talked about that in my previous video. I'll leave the link to it in the description box. According to Bob Arum, it was Top Rank who wanted these two guys to have keep busy fights. It was Top Rank who wanted both of these guys to have interim fights ahead of what was to be their fight, to buy themselves time until it were safe to stage fights with an audience. And now what they're saying is, you know what, we can't wait that long because we don't know when that's going to be. So we're going to go ahead with the fight whether we can have spectators present or not. And I think this past...
Was it a week ago, 2 weeks ago?
UFC card, the UFC 249 card. You know, this card that was staged not that long ago in the midst of this pandemic did about 700,000 pay-per-view buys, thereby indicating that the people at home, They need entertainment.
They need something to watch.
The pay-per-view ran for about $64.99, roughly $65. And this is at a time when folks like myself were unsure if the spectators would have the disposable income to spend on a pay-per-view in the midst of a global pandemic when most everybody is unemployed.
Right.
But these numbers are very encouraging numbers, and one can make the inference that by the time September rolls around, if things normalize a little more, and we slowly come out of this pandemic, this Vasyl Lomachenko versus Teofimo Lopez pay-per-view might do okay, even in the absence of an audience. I want to add to this that the boxing fans are indebted to Dana White for being the maverick that he is. This is in spite of the history that boxing fans and mixed martial arts fans have had with each other over the years, being at each other's throats, arguing over which sport is the superior sport, which I myself have always found to be a very primitive, slack-jawed, and naive, childish argument.
Yeah.
I think the boxing fans are indebted to Dana White for being the maverick that he is, because had he not decided to go ahead with his UFC 249 card, that wouldn't have given everyone else the green light to go ahead and try and stage cards of their own. Granted that Lomachenko versus Lopez has been postponed and it's been moved to September. It was supposed to go down much sooner than that, but better still, it does appear
To be going down.
that's the best news a boxing fan could ask for, at least right now, that we're not going to miss out on this highly anticipated fight because it has been built up. We were waiting for this thing, and we were just this close to getting it, and boom, COVID-19 hits. Fucks everything up for everybody. The fight fans and the fighters themselves. I have questions as far as what is the state of many of these fighters right now coming out of this pandemic. Are they ready to go? Are they ready to perform? Particular to this conversation, the state of Teofimo Lopez, who only a few weeks ago was reportedly hovering somewhere around 160 pounds. I've often thought about many of the things that Teofimo Lopez has said during this pandemic, during this shutdown, questioning Vasyl Lomachenko's willingness to have this fight, his commitment to it, while he himself ballooned in weight all the way up to 160 pounds. I mean, you say that you're ready to fight, you say that you want this Lomachenko guy, but looks more like you're getting ready to fight Gennady Golovkin than Vasyl Lomachenko, if you've let yourself go to the point to where you're at 160 pounds. Teofimo Lopez has roughly 3 months to prepare himself for this fight, cut the weight, if it is to happen in September.
Can he do it?
And can he do it healthy, fighting fit, and ready to perform? Well, there's really only one way to find out, right?
Right.
That's what we're going to do.